Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Casper the Boy Diviner, and it's been a long time since I've met you guys. I've been really busy, as you may tell. I really wanted to keep this up this whole year, but I kind of fell off the track. It took a while for me to get warm up. Even for this video, I feel a bit out of sorts. At the same time, let's dive into it. Today, I wanted to talk about the top 5 decks that I used and acquired this year. So this is a tag standout decks. I think it's done by Julie, and I think it's Three Girls Tarot, but I really saw an Aquamarine 18's video just because I haven't been watching TarotTube in a long time. To give you some quick background, I was laid off last year, so I spent this whole year trying to settle into my new role, which was something I was not really particularly well versed at. So it took me some time to really learn and pick up the ropes, and things were quite tough. But now it's the holiday season, so happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Let's dive into it. So today I wanted to do standout decks for tarot decks that I acquired this year and then used, and then they were my top 5. But I wanted to give an honorable mention to my favorite Oracle deck this year. My favorite Oracle deck this year is Poes Oracle. This deck is so good. I really love this deck. It comes out with the most simple, beautiful messages. My only regret is that I bought this from a Hong Kong retailer just because they were near me, right? So I wanted to support them. Even though I bought it this year, I got the first edition. So I didn't manage to get the second edition, which actually feels better because I have a friend who has the second edition. When I shuffled the second edition, it feels so good. It also has gilded edges, I think, the second edition. I don't care about the edges, but the paper quality on the second edition is much better. So I really recommend, if you do get the Poes Oracle, do buy the second edition. So here's some sample cards. Play, beautiful, really nice. Explore, super beautiful. Fear. So I really love the messages that come from this. So you saw the messages were play, tears, explore, and fear. And then easily you can just read play around with feeling your emotions, including the bad ones, including tears, and then explore your fears. So you see, play with your emotions, play and try to enjoy and understand the uniqueness of your negative emotions, and then also explore the fears that you have about your life and try to push yourself there. So you see there's a coherent message. No matter what you pull from this deck, it's always a coherent message, and that's why I really like this deck. So without further ado, let me dive into the top 5 decks that I acquired and liked this year. The first one I wanted to talk about is the Ritual Tarot. This deck is a beautiful deck, and this was really more for like magic practice. I used it once in a while when I was doing my magic practice, even though this year I wasn't super active. But when I wanted a card to really focus on, one card pool that really helps me dive deeper into whatever mind space I wanted to be in. For example, if I wanted to really dive into the High Priestess kind of energy, I'll try to pull the High Priestess card out. And I did a full walkthrough and review of this deck, so you can check it out on my channel. But again, this is more for a one-card pull. I tried using this for mundane things. I tried doing this on a day-to-day basis, but I really found it better for ritualistic work, and that's why it's called the Ritual Tarot, right? This is one of my favorite decks for that kind of magic work that we do, or the kind of reflection work that we do, shadow work that we do. So this is the first one I'm going to talk about, the 5th in my top 5 this year. The next deck was something else I actually reviewed as well. Even though this is one of the top decks I'm mentioning this year, because of the art, I really love the art, I do find some downsides into using this deck. This deck I wanted to show you guys is the Somnia Tarot illustrated version. So I didn't get the photo version. If you watched my review, you would know, because I felt like the photographic version was a bit harsh, was a bit scary, was a bit too dark for my liking. If I was doing a reading, I want something more balanced, right? And there was an overarching sense of like fear or some sort of downness with this deck, and I thought the illustrated version would actually help. At the same time, I didn't feel so. I feel like the illustrated version is also a bit sadly to say. So even though I do use this deck, sometimes the messages that come out don't feel as joyful as they can be, and I totally understand that, because that is the style of this deck. That's the style of the artist. He came up with this deck because of his dreams, I think, or his nightmares even. Like, I think he had sleep paralysis as well, which is something I used to have as well. So I understand the whole vibe of this deck. I do appreciate the vibe, and I really like the art. it's just a deck that I don't really reach out for because I don't find it as universal, if you get what I mean. Technically, I would use this for ritual magic as well, but I do have the ritual tarot now, so there is a bit of a difficulty in choosing. I have so many decks anyway, so it depends on the vibes that I'm feeling that day. Regardless of that, the quality of the deck, the look of the deck, the illustrations, the vibes, I really like the Somnia Tarot illustrated version. The next deck I wanted to talk about is the Ephemera deck. So this deck is another indie deck, and it came quite recently. This wasn't in my top 5 at first, actually. I wanted to show the Green Glyphs Tarot as the 5th one. At the same time, that deck really didn't get much use this year. I found it a bit too simple, a bit too difficult to read sometimes because the stories of the miners were a bit different. But recently, I just powdered all my decks because the Ephemera deck is the same as the True Black. I have problems shuffling it. I really don't like how it shuffles. I don't like the rose petal finish. And to be honest, when I first received this deck, I got turned off by the foil. I really didn't like the foil. I found that, especially why I like the foil in the images. Don't get me wrong. I just hate the foil on the font. I don't feel like the font and the foil goes well together. I wish the font was just printed. It became a bit too blinding, a bit too difficult to read, and some of the cards were a bit blurry. Let me show you one that I feel like it's a bit blurry. For example, this one, the 5 of Cups. I do find it a bit blurry at the bottom. So that was it. So it was difficult to shuffle. Some of the cards were a bit blurry. I didn't really like the foil on the font, but I powdered the deck. If you want to know more about powdering your deck to make sure it's easier to shuffle, you can watch Bellman's video about helping to shuffle matte decks. I used her formula as well, which is basically corn flour and some baking soda. And now it shuffles beautifully. With that whole shuffling thing being over, the font thing was a small thing. It wasn't a huge deal. I am beginning to appreciate this deck. However, another hurdle to this deck is the different mages, right? The mages are different here significantly. They try to follow the hero's journey more than the arcana, and I'm also finding that a bit of adjustment. So I have committed myself to be using this deck more often and trying to understand that the new mages. I think one of the new mages that I actually really liked was Dulces. Yeah, Dulces. Let me find it. I don't know how to pronounce this. I don't know, is it Dulces or Dulces? But basically, this is about excess, right? I feel like this is the devil card. And I really like this idea of temptation in a different setting or a different form. Right? I think Dulces is about internal temptations, your internal weaknesses, more so than the external circumstances that the devil sometimes provides. So it's a different vibe, a different understanding, and I'm trying to get to know this deck better. I put it in my third position just because the first two were very specific. I do feel like this deck can be used for more mundane things. It can be used for more self-reflection things. It could be used for different purposes, and that's why it's in my third position. The next deck I want to show you, my top second one, is actually the the Thoth Tarot. So everyone knows about the Thoth, right? I really hated my Thoth Tarot because of the purplish borders in the standard version that I have, and I also found astrology a bit difficult to really get into. This year I started studying Vedic astrology, so that has helped a bit. Secondly, because Books Depository closed this year, right? I told myself I want to get some decks before they close down. I bought a few decks. I did buy the Siddhartha Tarot, which is a Buddhist-based tarot, but I never really got into it. And I got this large version of the Thoth, and I actually trimmed it. And I feel like this has changed the game for the Thoth Tarot. It has opened up the images so much. So anyone who is struggling with the Thoth, I really suggest you trim it. You buy the large version and you trim it. Clearly, I didn't do the best trimming ever. You can see some of the borders still there. However, I do feel like even if you do it imperfectly, it doesn't matter because it opens the image so much. I've done readings with this and people are like, wow, what deck is this? And I'm like, it's a Thoth Tarot. And they're like, oh, I didn't know it had such beautiful images. Just because people were so stuck, and myself included, I was so stuck on the ugly borders and the ugly fonts. This has really changed the game for me, and I really hope to use this deck more next year, because this year I keep getting distracted by the new decks I buy, and this deck is not a indie deck. This deck is a mass market deck. So, you know, you try to use the more expensive ones first just because you spend more money on it. But this deck is really exquisite. My top deck for this year, out of all the decks I've acquired, is also a mass market deck. So that might be a bit interesting for you guys. And it's the Fodor Tarot. So this deck is, of course, it was an indie deck at first. The mass market version came out and actually US games did not disappoint. I really like this deck and I really like the images. I love the backs, but the backs are foil, right? The decks have some foil and some of them has already peeled off based on my shuffling. But the card stock is amazing. The gilding is nice and not too shiny. You know, some gilding is mirror gilding, which is like blinding. This is kind of a bit more darker and I really like how it shuffles. It is that kind of linen finish that isn't too apparent. You know, it doesn't scream that it's linen. And yeah, I really love this deck. This deck is my top deck of this year out of all the decks I've acquired for a good reason. I love the pops of color. I love the lack of color in some places. There's really nothing bad to say about this deck. This deck is one of the best decks I've seen in a long time, and it's also beginner friendly. It is still close to the RWS. It has great representation, for example, this card. So really, there's nothing bad to say about this deck. I really like how some of the images actually pop out of the frame. You can see this one, for example. And it's so accessible. It's gorgeous, it's accessible. Really, this deck is one of the, I would say, best decks I've seen in a long time. Well produced. I know it's slightly expensive for a mass market deck, but honestly, this is worth the money to me. You can also see even US games, right? They have learned the lesson. They have made their branding so small and unnoticeable. So it's really a win. Out of all the indie decks I got this year, maybe I didn't choose the best ones. This is my top deck of this year. This mass market deck, the Fodor Tarot. I really like the book that comes with it as well. The only thing I have to complain again is that the box is huge. I wish I have a small box, but you know, I can buy a pouch. The bad thing about a pouch is I get mixed up with all the different decks I have. I don't remember which pouch I use for which ones, and that's why it gets very messy, but regardless, best deck of the year. So just to quickly recap, I showed my favorite Oracle deck of this year, the Poes Tarot. I talked about the Ritual Tarot and also the Somnia Tarot, both more for ritual purposes or magical purposes. I talked about the Ephemer Tarot, where you need to actually do some work to actually get along with it. You need to powder it because the shuffling experience is terrible. Not as bad as the True Black, but still terrible. And the mages are not the same in the Ephemer Tarot as well, so that one needs a bit of work. It's a good indie deck, it just needs some work, and I need to think about whether I want to put that work in. The next deck I want to talk about is the Thoth Tarot Trimmed. So I really like it trimmed, it really opens up the images, and I'm really hoping to get to know the Thoth Tarot better this year, especially because I started learning some Vedic astrology. And lastly, my favorite tarot of the year that I've acquired is the Fodor Tarot. So this is my hashtag standout decks of the year, and I hope you enjoyed this. And yeah, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, have a happy new year. Bye guys, bye.